Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ask TotalBiscuit Anything. Took a brief hiatus from this, mostly because I wasn't around. As simple as that. I was in Vegas for a week, so I didn't really have a chance to do any of it. But there are plenty of questions left to answer in the AMA, so I'm going to continue as you would expect. In the next few episodes, you're going to be seeing a playthrough of FTL. Those of you who watched it on the live stream know exactly what happened there, but for the vast majority of you, this is a new and rather interesting playthrough. Okay, let's kick it off, shall we? And this one comes in from Hast. Is that the same Hast that does the Guild Wars stuff? Huh, interesting. I have to wonder if it is or not. It might be. I want to go check his Reddit history now and find out exactly who this guy is. Yes, it actually is that guy. So I would recommend you actually check this guy out because he's pretty cool. He is youtube.com/HAASTH22. Yeah, HAASTH22. So Hast22 or whatever. So yeah. He's good, actually. He does quite a few decent Guild Wars videos, as well as a few other things, so yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And his question is, do you have any specific advice, tricks of the trade for smaller YouTube partners to gain more attention? Alright. I get this question a lot, and I have a feeling that some people think there's some kind of magical way to be successful on YouTube, and more often than not, there really isn't. There's a couple of ways which may increase your chances of getting success, but they may also attract the kind of element that you're not really looking for. And of course, I'm referring to bandwagoning. If you want to bandwagon, then potentially you could get a lot of people that way. Because some people are just obsessed with stuff like Happy Wheels and Slender and things like that. Although I have to say that playing Slender is not a particularly good way of getting people onto your channel. Slender's a very short game. There's really not an awful lot you can do with that. And of course, once you've exhausted that, unless you have some other kind of gimmick to keep people in there, well, it's more of a case of just bleeding them back out again and saying, all right, that was funny. Hara, another Slender playthrough. Let's go elsewhere. So what I would say is you've got to find a niche and exploit the hell out of it. It sounds like a fairly obvious thing, really, but some people don't really seem to understand what's going on with it. You have to find what you're best at and then stick to it without question. Once you've done that, and once you've found something that's successful, you can then use the success to get everyone to watch your other stuff. It's similar to a band playing covers in order to get people into a venue in order to hear their originals. Examine what it is you're good at. Do you have an interesting voice? Can you crack jokes on the fly? Are you just generally entertaining, or are you more informative? Do you know a lot about a particular subject? Because if you do, then it's good to exploit that knowledge where possible. Build your channel around that idea. Once you've got one successful series, then you can hook in enough people to spread them around, as long as you don't extend too far away from what brought them in the first place. If you do informative, knowledgeable stuff, and then you start doing Happy Wheels screechy plays, then you're not going to get very far, because those people are just going to instantly leave. Like, they didn't come for that. So why on earth would they stick around? In fact, that actually indicates that you're just willing to sell out for whatever reason. Generally not a good idea. Now, there is one problem, of course, with finding a niche and then just exploiting the hell out of it and essentially running it into the ground. It's that you bring in a very particular kind of person sometimes. Like, an example for this, I would say, would be the Yogscast. The Yogscast can never stop doing Minecraft. If they do, they will suffer a massive drop, a huge drop in the number of people that watch their material. They've been trying to do this for years. They've been doing the whole Minecraft thing, and then they try to get people to watch their other stuff, and it's never anywhere close. Like, you watch an episode of Tekkit, see how many views that gets, versus them playing any other game, and you can see the massive difference. There are a lot of people subscribed to that channel that just want to watch Minecraft, and they're not interested in anything else. So as a result, you can never really leave that. Bear in mind the problem that people have a tendency of feeling very entitled and very betrayed when it comes to free content on the internet. If they come for something specific, and that suddenly doesn't happen anymore, they tend to get rowdy. Some of them will actively go out of their way to try and destroy you if you deviate from a particular formula. There were some attempts to do that when I stopped doing WoW, but thankfully the channel was stable enough and I diversified at the right time and got enough support behind WTF Is in order to keep the channel successful. In addition to the whole niche thing, I would say consistency is perhaps the most important, because you want to make sure that you are a part of someone's daily routine. And the way that you do that is by producing consistent content. So if you're only producing content at random, maybe you put out 3 episodes one week, and then next week you don't have anything, and then the week after that there's one, and people don't know when the stuff's coming out, and they get sick of it because they expect it on a regular basis. Now, this whole on-demand culture is supposedly destroying television, right? But it's not getting rid of the notion that people want content on a fairly regular basis. They don't want to watch it at a particular time. They don't want to have to sit down at 8 o'clock in the evening every Thursday to watch something particular, but they do want this stuff to come out on a weekly basis because they know, hey, there's going to be an episode of this thing that I like this week, which I can look forward to. And if it doesn't happen, then people tend to get rowdy. And I've fallen victim to this, actually, with Terraria, because Terraria has a huge following. And if I screw it up and I don't put it out one week, then people get rowdy. And that's actually a problem. That's something we should try to address on a regular basis. But I have a lot of other things on my mind, as, of course, does Jesse Cox. So, yeah, he's a little bit busy. Do be careful not to bite off more than you can chew. If you say you're going to do a weekly show or even a daily show, don't do that, by the way. This is a piece of advice that I put out for someone who has done a daily show and continues to do daily shows. Don't do daily shows. Really, it's actually a massive, and I do mean absolutely huge, drain. Missing even one episode can actually do damage beyond what you would think, so I would avoid that if it's all possible. Do regular, don't necessarily do daily, because it then becomes a bit of a chore. Azeroth Daily, for instance, became a huge chore for me towards the end of it. It was like, oh god, I've got to do yet another Azeroth Daily. I'm wasting hours and hours and hours of my time every day producing this show, and not all that many people are watching it, and it's a complete waste of my time, blah, blah, blah. So I think I can deal with daily shows now, but it took a good couple of years for me to get in the right kind of mindset and have the right kind of work ethic, and even then I required support from my staff in order to make it work out. Here's one from Orion that says, any plans for comedy shows or skits like the Nubcake News you did during your WoW days? It's a difficult one because producing that kind of stuff for radio and podcast is entirely different from doing something for video. I could make those quite easily. Like, I can write a script and record something like that in a couple of hours. The problem is, what do I put on the screen? I can't get away with that stuff anymore. The only way it could really work is if I teamed up with an animator, and then, of course, it would take a great deal of time for the animator to make the stuff. It would also cost a lot of money. If I wanted to actually post this content on a regular basis, I would probably be paying the animator more than I would actually make for the videos. So it doesn't make a huge amount of sense to really do that. Radio plays are really easy to create. Comedy videos, whether or not they be machinima pieces, whether or not they be cartoons, or, even more extreme, live action, take a huge amount of time to create. There is a reason why, if you happen to go to any of the popular animators' channels, you'll see there is actually not an awful lot of content there. I mean, the Harry Partridge channel, for instance, the last thing he put out was 2 months ago, and that was the Hitman Absolution video. There was a month gap before that with Irving, the socially awkward bee, and then we also had Starbarians, which was 3 months before that. It's pretty crazy. Like, in a year, he's maybe made about 8 videos maximum, and they're not very long either. A group like Film Cow, for instance, they put out probably 1 video a week at most, and a lot of them aren't really big animations, like stuff like Llamas with Hats. There's only 3 episodes of Marshmallow People, and of course, this is the guy that did Charlie the Unicorn as well, and there aren't really all that many episodes of that either. So there's little bits of incidental content. You can very clearly see when you look at it that the cartoons are the ones that get the mega views, and then all this incidental stuff really isn't all that important. Like 2 months ago, there was a video that they put up on their channel called Hit It With a Car, Monopoly. And that got 95,000 views in 2 months. That's not very good. However, when they put out a short called Business Cats, which was a 2-minute, fairly badly animated thing, I mean, there's actually not a lot of animation work in this whatsoever. Most of it is just static scene with animated mouths. So it's pretty quick. I mean, in comparison to stuff like Marshmallow People, Depressed Whale, and of course Charlie the Unicorn and Llamas with Hats, there is no way this took anywhere near as long, but you'll also notice it didn't get anywhere near as many views either. But it did get a reasonable amount, especially compared to Hit It With a Car, Monopoly. So, as you can see, cartoon stuff is pretty damn difficult. I mean, even the Lore channel for TGS puts out maybe 1 video a week, and that's a minute long, yeah? So it takes the animator a week to create a minute's worth of footage. It is a crazy amount of work, and there's no real way that the lore channel is actually making back the money. I mean, even in terms of the number of views it makes, maybe there's a couple that did, like say the League of Legends lore video probably made it back, maybe the TF2 video, maybe even the Space Marine video, but a lot of these don't. Yeah, I look at the number of views and I also look at the amount of work that's gone into it, and I'm like, there's no way this made back the money that would be required to pay someone with this kind of talent. And that's the problem. It really is. You can use these as a loss leader. Like, if you're gonna use these kind of things for your channel, then you've got to look at them in such a way that they're gonna bring people into the channel, but they're not actually gonna make you any money. Hopefully those people stay and watch your other stuff. So you're investing a lot of money into what's essentially a promotional piece. I wouldn't mind doing that every now and again, but at the end of the day, I've also got a lot of other expenses. Come on, I'm trying to run an esports team here. It costs quite a lot of money, so I'm not really in a position where I can throw money at creating this kind of content, but hopefully sometime I will be. I can get someone to animate this stuff, and I can actually do this kind of thing again, because some of the Nubcake news was pretty funny, I think. You know, I still listen back to some of it and think, you know what, that had some potential there, that had some funny moments. Maybe I could do that. We'll see. I wouldn't expect it anytime in the near future, though. Question from What's the Flop? Planning on doing any Eurogaming conventions next year like Rezzed, if there's actually going to be a 2013 Rezzed? Well, I hope there is, because from what I heard, Rezzed was a really good show. But I don't really have any plans to do smaller UK events anymore, mostly because it's too expensive and it's too stressful. You've got to understand that I absolutely despise flying. This is something that moving to the US really didn't help me with at all, it turns out. I'm going to live in the East Coast. Oh, all the conventions are on the West Coast, so that means a 5-hour flight pretty much every time. Oh, and yes, it always flies over the Midwest as well, where things have a tendency of getting a little bit bumpy. Hey, mountain ranges, that's not going to cause turbulence or anything. Yeah, apparently it will, but oh god. It annoys the hell out of me. It really does, because it's utterly irrational to be afraid of flying. It's the safest way to travel statistically. You have someone flying your aircraft who has tons of experience and many redundant systems to ensure that you don't go careening into the ground. And yet I much prefer to travel in a car, even though it's infinitely more dangerous. You know, I can actually identify when it was that I started to become afraid of flying. I didn't used to be, but there was one trip over the Atlantic that really did it for me. I was flying out on British Airways, I was flying out from Gatwick, if I recall correctly, going back to Charlotte, and what happened was we hit what was called a negative pressure pocket, which actually causes the aircraft to drop suddenly. Yeah? So apparently I dropped a couple of thousand feet in a couple of seconds. You just go meow straight down, and the aircraft was shaking all over the place. You know, it feels like your stomach's in your throat, and stuff was falling out of the overhead bins. People were screaming, and yeah, that didn't go so well for anybody. And after that point, I became really afraid of flying. And every time I do it, it stresses the hell out of me. If I fly, I can't do an event on the same day because I'm just too stressed. Usually I've burned through so much adrenaline that I feel really tired by the time that I actually reach the destination. So I'm not in a reasonable or focused state able to actually do anything whatsoever. So I don't think I would be going back to the UK anytime soon to do events over there. I would love to go back to Gamescom, and Gamescom is a great event, but for Gamescom when I was in the UK, I could actually take the train. It took ages, but it didn't matter, because taking the Eurostar, and what I'd do is I'd go from Newcastle, I'd take the train down to London, and then I'd take the Eurostar all the way through to Belgium, and then I connect through Belgium, and then just take the Thalys, which would take me all the way through to Cologne, which is where I needed to be. And that was awesome. That was a really pleasant journey. I got to sit there with my laptop watching stuff, being given alcohol and things like that. I picked all this stuff up first class, because actually it wasn't that expensive. Like, if you pre-book it in advance, we could do first class travel without too much of a problem, and it was great. You know, you get fed, you get alcohol, you get really comfortable seats, the environment's great, you get Wi-Fi on pretty much every train except for the Eurostar, for fairly obvious reasons. Wi-Fi in a tunnel under the sea doesn't really tend to work all that well. But honestly, I don't really want to fly out to these events anymore. I'm even considering moving out west so that I'll be closer to a lot of these things, and so I can actually drive to a lot of them, or at least have shorter flights. I mean, I'll take 30 minutes to an hour over 5 hours any day of the week. Alright, let's do one more, shall we? So this is kind of a combo question. I'm going to go and address most of this. This is from I don't even know what that is. I'm not even going to bother. That's a silly name. You shouldn't have picked that name. What can I say? Okay, so the question is, what's the status of the FTL series? Are you still working on it? No, I'm not. I don't know. FTL almost became a bandwagon, but that doesn't really concern me all that much. It was mostly just down to the fact that I didn't really think I could make the series up to the standard I wanted. I wanted to do a very heavily edited kind of captain's log thing, write a really good script, have voice actors, and I just don't have the time right now. I don't. I mean, the heavily edited stuff, like, say, The Deadliest War, takes an inordinate amount of time, and I've got so many things going on at the moment. Maybe in the new year I do something like that. That's a possibility. Maybe when my schedule clears up, but right now I've got too many events to really make that work. With the changing to DX Tory in the last few days, what is your experience with it? Would you recommend it? I like DX Tory for what it does. I like the fact that it doesn't drop my frame rate as much as Fraps. The thing about Fraps is it locks to the nearest 30, so if it ever drops below 59 frames per second, it tends to go to 30. Not 60. The thing rounds down for whatever reason. That's incredibly annoying, especially when trying to play FPS. Good luck playing any kind of online FPS with 30 frames per second. It's really unpleasant, and you just suck. It's as simple as that. So the change to DX Story was good there. I used DX Story before for streaming. It was my virtual camera for streaming, so it's not like I hadn't used it before. But it has a great deal of options, and it allows for a wide variety of choices. Being able to change your encoding process is very handy indeed. One thing I would say about DX Story is that it's a bit fiddlier. It does take a little bit more configuration. My old method of recording Terraria, for instance, doesn't work with DX Story, and you have to configure a larger number of options every time you want to do any kind of collab work. Just because DX Tory doesn't automatically use the sound card that you select in Windows, it uses the one that you select within the program. So the Air Buccaneers video, for instance, didn't have any in-game sound because I didn't know this at the time. But aside from that, DX Tory is definitely a really good program. I still have Fraps on my machine because there are some games that DX Tory just doesn't work all that well with, so I still have to keep Fraps in my little toolbox. But DX Tory, for the most part, is a great program. What's the status on Trollo Battles? Well, Trollo Battles is doing, as far as I'm aware, pretty well. Aveen's been really, really busy with other projects, so it's not like I offered him a lot of money to make this thing. I'm still trying to keep up to date on what's going on with it, and I'm hoping it will still come out, but at the end of the day, it is very much reliant on the person modding it. I come up with the ideas, he implements them, and at the moment, we seem to have hit a standstill with it. I'm hoping we do manage to release it, though, because it seemed like a good concept. And last but by no means least, how are the chinchillas? Pretty good. They are pretty good. The chins are getting along quite nicely. I was very surprised that happened because we got one chinchilla from a pet store and we rapidly realized, God, we need another chinchilla, don't we? Because they like to keep each other company. They get very lonely very easily, as well as getting very bored. And that's a risk, because honestly, if you get a chinchilla from a different litter that isn't used to living with the existing chin, then there can be problems. They can fight to the death sometimes. Thankfully, we were fortunate in getting a younger dwarf chinchilla, which is a fairly rare mutation. It's a much smaller chinchilla. She'll never be as big as our current one, and our current one is still growing. I think she's only about 6 months old. The dwarf is more like 3 months old. And they get along really well, surprisingly well. There was a little bit of apprehension at the start, but they very quickly learned that it was pretty cool having a friend, so they were okay there. Funnily enough, it was actually an accidental meeting. That was the weird thing about it. They met each other when one of them managed to get out of the cage. The dwarf chinchilla managed to squeeze out of the bars of the other cage because she was that small at the time. And we didn't realize she left. We thought she was still in a little house, and we let the big chin out to play outside of the cage, which she gets to do for about an hour a day, and they ended up meeting under the couch. And it actually worked out surprisingly well because of the small cage issue, the fact that the dwarf chin could actually get out of the small cage. We had to put her in the big cage with the other one, and we kept a very close eye on them pretty much all day. We sat down there for a day watching them, and there was a bit of initial kind of hissing and spitting and things like that, and grinding of teeth, which is what they tend to do. And then they just got along, no problem at all, and there's never been an issue between them since. And we go downstairs, often we find one of them just kind of smooshed on top of the other. No, it's not what you're thinking. They're both female, and one of them likes to lie on the other one sideways, kind of on top. It's kind of weird. They'll smoosh together. It's kind of adorable, honestly. There's no question about that, but it's still a case of trying to bond with them as kind of a human-to-chin relationship. They are still distrustful. If you let them out, they will probably run straight for the couch, and then maybe they'll come out after about 10-15 minutes. Maybe they just want to chill under the couch, because I guess that's a comfortable, warm, and more importantly, dark place for them. But it's going to take probably several years to get them to trust us enough to actually climb on us and do things like that and not get freaked out when we try to pick them up. Chinchillas are pretty awesome, though. They're great pets. You do need very specific things in order to keep them in good health. For instance, good climate control. If you don't have climate control, then you shouldn't get a chinchilla, because anything above about 70 degrees Fahrenheit and chins start to get sick, because, of course, they come from the Andes Mountains. It was pretty damn cold up there. And other things, never get them wet, of course. They always have dust baths. If you get them wet, then that gets really, really bad indeed. They are susceptible to molding fur and all sorts of things like that. And you've got to feed them a very specific diet, and they have a tendency of eating stuff that will kill them, so it's a little bit awkward. But aside from that, they're good pets, they're interesting, they're adorable, and they're fairly intelligent as well, so that I'm pretty damn happy with. I would recommend chinchillas to most people, honestly. Alright, folks, that is me done for this episode of the AMA. Thank you very much once again for watching, and I will see you next time.